And it's happening again this evening at 8, just
So we're gonna expedite this meeting, right?
well, we'll see how it goes, but,
Are you recording it, at least?
yeah, it's been set up to DVR, and actually I've got my lucky T-shirt set laying in my chair as we speak. So, not that it matters, it's just a game and all.
All righty.
Yeah, listen, it's only silly and not superstition if it doesn't work. And they're 12-1 and ranked number 1 in the country,
No,
so
something like you're wearing your same pair of underwear every day.
let's not get carried away. That's only during the tournaments.
And with that, I think we're ready to start.
And with that, yeah, we'll go ahead and, get started. So, we'll call Gardner City Council to order. Would invite everybody in attendance to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and Happy New Year to everyone. We don't have any public hearings or presentations this evening, so we will move directly to public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. If you'd like to make a public comment, please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and be heard. Make sure you speak into the microphone. I would remind everyone that's seated around the dais to do the same.
Dale Rose, 15340 Edgerton Road in Gardner. Just wanted to say something nice tonight. I want to thank the City of Gardner for sponsoring their very first annual New Year's Day Chili Fest at the airport, at their new airport. And we had about 70-plus people, plus one city councilman, and he got his bandages off tonight, I see, and we had quite a bit of chili out there and food and wonderful desserts and a lot of friendship. We had people from Liberty Regional Airport, from Warrensburg area, Green Valley, Executive Airport, a nice contingency over from New Century over here from the CAF, Paola, Ottawa, Midland Valley, and just friends we haven't seen sometimes in a year or so, but we just sit around and talk airplanes or whatever, and families, to see how things are going. So it was just a real good day we had out there, and I hope to see more of you out next year. And let's see, we just pretty much, we had a guy from Paola, he brought in a pot of chili called the Atomic Bomb, and he had a warning sign on it. But other than that, that was about it. So, thank you guys.
Well, thank you, Dale.
Cam Blazer, 12121 Norwood, Leawood, Kansas. Been out here at the airport since 1982. We received our leases, my game, at 2:30 on New Year's Eve. So I don't know if it was lack of planning, and you put Brian in kind of a difficult position, and all the people at the airport. I hope it was not intentional. I'd like to call your attention to paragraph 4.4 of the aircraft lease. And that states, if the leasee causes damage to leased premises, hangar building, leasee will reimburse the leaseor cost of repair due on or before the next monthly rent payments. Then you drop down to 12.3, casualty loss. If partial or total loss occurs arising out of the negligence or fault of the lessee, shall promptly reimburse for cost, repair, restoration, replacement, and pay for any loss sustained by the lessor as a result of such occurrence. If it's an insurable thing, they will give you time to process the insurance. The insurance that you're asking for is $200,000, which in negotiation we took out, but then I understand the city attorney put it back in the lease. I would like to use Lee Moore as an example. Lee's building an RV airplane. I think he's the only one that probably would be affected by anything that you guys approve here that I've seen so far. Unless some of the rest of you take up flying, Lee's the only one that's shown an interest. And he's building an RV, and one of these days he's going to want to bring it out to the airport. And he's going to sign this lease. I presume he's going to have to sign this lease, unless you work like the Senate and Congress where you pass Obamacare and it doesn't apply to you. But I think this applies to Lee. With a scenario, I had an attorney friend of mine interpret that for me. And I would like you, Lee, to ask Ryan if he concurs. To my knowledge, since the airport's been there, we've never had a fire. Since '82, we have not had a fire. We've had some wind damage that's been on the insurance. All these years, Airport Commission insured the building, drew a line in the sand, and we insured anything that went in that building. Made it very simple. This gets rather complicated. Lee, when he gets his RV a little bit bigger, and his wife, I spoke to her several months ago, and I think she's about ready for him to take it to the airport anyway. When he takes it to the airport, he's going to be working on it and sign this lease, I presume. Through some incident, Lee catches on fire, the building. Half of our buildings have no fire stops in them. When that fire goes up, it's going to hit the ceiling and go the whole length. So you're going to have 20 hangars all involved. The last hangars we built out there cost $995,000, and that was over 5 years ago. I would say that's probably going to be $1,200,000 now. To clean up the fire mess, probably going to take another $100,000. In there, you also, Ryan, I believe, are aiming to recoup the lost rent. So say it takes 6 months at 20 hangars at $250, that's another $30,000. It's immediately due, except for the $200,000 that you can get out of the insurance company. I don't know how Lee is, but you take the $200,000 off, and you got $1,130,000 to come up with immediately. I don't know whether Lee's wife's going to let him sign that lease or not, unless he makes a whole lot more being a city councilman than I think. And some of us are retired, that would wipe us out. So respectfully, I'd like for you to reconsider that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Good evening. Jerry Gipner, 14810 West 159th. I'll say a 59th again, just for Brian's benefit. Inside joke there, folks. Happy New Year, anyway. And everything I'm going to talk about is just, again, my observations. I started out saying a meeting or two ago that Democracy only works because people want to do the right thing. And now that I'm getting to know you all a little bit, I understand that you really want to do the right thing. And I can't believe how many hours you people have to put in for what you do here and so forth. So I appreciate it, and I thank you for your service there. Moving on, though, I've stated several times there that we've got to be a little more cautious because things, as I say, are never what they seem. Now, talking to one of the council members there, we say nothing nefarious is going on, and I truly believe that you all believe that. But at the same time, we've lost 3 airports here in the Kansas City area, or had them taken over by the respective cities, and hundreds across the country in the same last quarter of the last year. Never happened before in history. Just an observation. Then, kind of on a sideline there, what's going on with the Constitution today in the Second Amendment. You need to be a little cautious about what's going on. And then let's go to the staff for a minute, okay? I'm going to get the old man crazy bit again, talk about Agenda 21. Hickley, okay? And your staff, because, you know, they've all been through college, they all have degrees, and everything in college in the last 30 years has been leading them to this new world order. And that is Agenda 21, and I'm sure they don't even realize it, but every time they fill out a brief and present it to you people, it is slanted kind of in that direction. Just something to think about and watch for, you know. Let's talk about lawyers for a minute, okay? Got a grin over there. A lawyer's main job is not to serve you or me, it's to propagate the legal system, correct? I've never hired a lawyer yet when it wasn't a mistake, that I had to pay for what he did and for it to be corrected. And when you read this contract, you just got, which I haven't read yet because I just got mine this evening, but I read the early version, and it's almost more like a joke. I mean, it is just open to create more problems, and I think that was kind of what was written for, because it's certainly not acceptable the way it is. So anyway, that's all I got is just, guys, thank you for your service, but think about what you're doing and what is going on around you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Good evening. My name is Ray Durr. I live at 241 Peachtree Lane, Gardner, Kansas, and I'm currently on the airport board. I too would also love to talk about the lease in a couple of items on there. It's like during the December 14th airport board meeting, we reviewed the hangar lease in great detail. The changes recorded by Brown Foss were accurately reflected in the update copy sent to the airport board members via email on December 15th. The board verified the changes, and Brian forwarded this proposal lease to the city attorney. The city attorney added item 5 of Article 4 back into the lease after the airport board had removed it. This item states, lessee shall comply with Gardner Airport minimum standards adopted by lessor for the use of the leased premises as they currently exist and as they may be amended from time to time. First of all, the minimum standards was enacted by the airport board, so we would have rules and regulations by which a business operating at the Gardner Airport would have to follow. This was in response to being asked if a skydiving school could be operated at Gardner Airport. The minimum standards was never intended to be enforced by individuals renting hangar space for privately owned aircraft. Secondly, the hangar lease should be all-encompassing, meaning it should not have to be based on yet another document like minimum standards. This is why it should be removed from the lease completely. Currently, the requirements in the minimum standards and the lease conflict with each other, so then which is the tenant supposed to believe? Finally, how can we expect a tenant to sign a lease where the lessor has the right to change the minimum standards and in effect the terms of the lease by having the clause as they currently exist and may be amended from time to time? If you want the ability to change the terms of the lease, this should only be done on an annual basis by having the tenant sign a new yearly lease. This is the common practice when you rent an apartment. During the city council meeting on December 21st, Steve Shute brought up the concern about the lease and the requirements of the minimum standards. A 10 to 15 minute discussion took place. The city council agreed to suspend enforcement of this requirement, but yet it is still in the lease. Had the city simply removed this requirement from the lease prior to sending it to the tenants, this would not have happened. A much better approach would have been to review the minimum standards in 2016 and then possibly add it to the lease the following year. But I still believe it does not belong in the hangar lease. I came to City Hall tonight to sign my lease with the item 5, Article 4, striped out, which states lessees shall comply with the Gardner Airport minimum standards adopted by the lessee as they currently exist and be amended from time to time. But Brian Foss said this can't be signed with the lease with that statement struck out. Now I'm at a loss on how to proceed. I would like to ask the City Council to strike this requirement from the 2016 until the lease and minimum standards can be reviewed in a more detailed and then possibly add it in the 2017 lease if required. I doubt very much that the city attorney would sign any kind of binding legal contract where they can change the underlying terms at any time, at any place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raymond.
Roger Thomas, 300 North Persimmon Drive, Olathe, Kansas. The the city said that they were going to put up a drop box at the airport so that what we could do, and I assume also people in the community north of the airport, could put their payments into. That box is not up there. We were told that in the lease, we have to have our payment into you guys by the first of the month. We couldn't put it in a box, a drop box at all, because it's not out there. We had to go to some other way, which I put mine into the slot there at our airport so it could be collected and sent to you guys. And by the way, I did put in mine as payable to the city of Gardner Aviation. Hope that satisfies everyone. Now then, on another subject, Mr. Gipner talked about Agenda 21. My lady friend lives in a small town in between Cameron and Chillicothe, and she's looked at that area up there. It is absolutely rife with Agenda 21 crap. All of these are on ICLEI. They bought into it, and it's not good for this country. Last time I was here, I made reference to the fact that I had gone to Las Cruces, New Mexico, about 3-4 years ago because I had heard about Agenda 21. I knew nothing of it, and I wanted to see what the city of Las Cruces was happening to put up with. One of the things that I found was that the wilderness areas there in New Mexico were taken over by basically Agenda 21. You could not go in there unless you were walking. You could not even go in there via horse. Lord help a person that's disabled try and go in there in a wheelchair. The druggies bringing drugs into this country were going through there and didn't give a twit about what the laws were. Our Border Patrol could not follow them in there because they were restricted by regulations from going into that area. I found out there's only one person that can authorize a variance to that. They reside at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I expect the occupant there will never put that in. Agenda 21 in any city that follows it is not doing it any good at all. I have breakfast every Wednesday morning with some fellow pilots, much like what we do here in the city of Gardner when we attend one of the local restaurants on Monday and cuss and discuss what's going on. Sometimes it is not with the city, other things. One of the people I have breakfast with there on Wednesday morning said, "Hey, what is this Agenda 21? And I told him I'd bring 2 documents to him the following Wednesday that would tell him what was going on. He read it, and I was extremely surprised, this guy being a Navy pilot, that he picked up on it so doggone quickly. He looked at me and says, "That's communism. I don't want to see communism come into this country. I spent time in the Air Force fighting it. I don't want to fight it here in our country." Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. With no one else coming forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a council member that would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Melton, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and abstention, consent agenda passes. There are no committee recommendations this meeting or old business, so we'll move on to new business items. New business item number 1, consider a resolution of support for low-income housing tax credits for Brittany Court rehabilitation. Larry, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilman, thank you. We've received a request from the owners of Brittany Court, 151 Brittany Court, for low-income housing tax credits. This is a 41-unit bedroom complex, which was built some time back. It's now up for improvements. The proposed improvements are estimated to be about $1,350,000. They'll be spending about $30,000 per unit. We have done a review of the property. We do not have plans yet, but we do have information from the company as to the preliminary types of activities they'll be doing. And we have done a review of the tax payments of this company, and they're current on all their current property taxes. We have written an authorization letter at their request, which clarifies the rezoning is proper and applicable for the types of use that they're doing, and we've prepared a resolution to have them go forth and apply for their tax housing credits, which are due January 15th. So the letter and the resolution will go together with them to go forth and improve that. On another item, before we go any further on that particular item, about a year ago, the Commission voted on tax credits for the Mako Development Company at Gardner Estates Rehabilitation Project. Just wanted to give you a quick update on that because we do have the building plans in hand for that. That's a little over $1 million project. It is, again, a tax housing, low-income housing tax credit program. And there was some question at that point in time about the property tax payments for that business corporation, and they're now currently up to date. They've paid the first half of 2015, and it looks like they're current back to 2011. There is a question on some 2010 taxes, which they're still working on with Johnson County, as I understand it. I'm not sure of the disposition of those, but that's the only outstanding tax problem, and that could be from a prior ownership. So I wanted to give you a quick update on that particular item. They are moving forward, and we're expecting to do a pre-engineering electrical review with them because one of the major components of that upgrade, of course, is the electrical system, and since it is a fairly substantial age, it's going to require probably a little bit more money than they expected originally to put into it. So we're asking that you consider the tax credit resolution tonight for the ARCO company.
Okay. If that's the end of presentation, we'll open the floor for public comments on this issue. Anyone wanting to make public comments on new business item number 1, please step forward at this time, state your name and address for the record, and be heard. No one coming forward. Questions for Larry or other staff regarding new business item number 1? Lee, I see a leaning in that looks serious.
Yeah, I just have one question. I noted that this said that the applicant had applied in 2015. So I'm assuming the applicant doesn't require the acquisition of this property before rehab?
They currently own the property.
They currently own the property?
They're the current owners of the property. Their 2015 application, this is a competitive process every year, and the state always receives more applications than they have funds to disperse, and their application didn't rate high enough last year. They have since worked with the corporation to improve their application, and they hope to be more successful this year.
So the only outstanding question I have is on the fourth whereas in the proposed resolution. It says, whereas the development will be an acquisition and rehabilitation. Shouldn't that just say rehabilitation?
Larry?
We have somebody from the, company here?
Might be able to better answer that
Yeah.
question. My name is Matt Coates, I'm with Yarko Devco. My address is 7920 Ward Parkway, Kansas City, Missouri, 64114. The way that the ownership structure is currently set up is one of the principals of the company that I currently work for owns approximately 20% of the property, so it's still an acquisition. We will be purchasing the property from the entire ownership entity, which are, I mean, this was built 30 years ago, and the ownership entities stayed basically the same. A lot of it's held in various trusts. So it is an acquisition, but we currently retain some ownership of it.
That's all I had.
Anyone else?
Just curious how it's applied, or the tax credits are applied. Is it after construction is complete, or are there minimum standards that have to be met before?
The application is for the tax credits for sometime during this year. The resolution is good till the end of the year. They are preparing property improvement drawings, and there will be plans and specs that they'll have to meet before they would be able to get a building permit and move forward. But the funds will be given to them, as I understand it, these are after the fact funds. You do the rehabilitation and you do the matching grant funds that come down with, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Can you say that into the microphone?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
These tax credits are, they come after the project is complete.
Okay. Very good, Larry. Other questions? Rich?
No, I'm good, Mayor, thank you.
Steve? Christine? If there aren't any other further questions, I'd entertain a motion on resolution number 1941.
So moved. Second.
Motion, Shute, second. Winners, that we adopt resolution number 1941, supporting Yarko Development Company's application for low-income housing tax credits to rehabilitate 45 one-bedroom units at Brittany Court. City Clerk, can you call roll?
Yes, and just to correct, it's resolution number 1942. Sorry about that error there.
Very good. It's 1942.
Councilmember Harrison?
Yes.
Councilmember Melton?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Councilmember Shute?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
Resolution number 1942 passes. Next item on the agenda is new business item number 2. Consider adopting an ordinance adopting changes to the federal motor carrier safety regulations related to the operation of commercial motor vehicles. Laura Gorley, good evening.
Good evening. This is another one of my famous housekeeping items. In order to ensure the safety of our citizens and regulate truck traffic, back in July of 2013, the council passed an ordinance that adopted Kansas statutes by reference, which adopt federal motor carrier safety regulations by reference. So you adopted the state, the state adopted the feds, and you passed all that. And then, since then, Corporal Huff, your truck inspector, has discovered we left a piece out. So we'd like to put that section 385 back in, and at the same time, in 2013, we passed a fine schedule approved by the governing body, and I've included a statute that says actually the judge does that. So I have nothing more to say. Court clerk is here, as well as Corporal Huff, if you have any questions.
Okay.
I'm really shocked that Huff figured that out.
Hey,
Oh, I'm impressed that Huff figured that out.
yeah. Corporal, nice catch. Public comment regarding new business item number 2. With no person coming forward, questions or comments regarding ordinance number 2508. Is that correct, Jeannie?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone?
Thanks to Corporal Hoff for finding that.
Thank you. You know that Rich is the only one who can get away with that, right, Corporal? Yeah.
And Deanne, thank you for showing up too. If there's no questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion on ordinance number 2508.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Moore, that we adopt ordinance number 2508, adopting the federal motor carrier safety regulations related to the operation of commercial motor vehicles. City Clerk, can you call roll?
Councilmember Harrison?
Yes.
Councilmember Melton?
Yes.
Councilmember Moore?
Yes.
Councilmember Shute?
Yes.
Councilmember Winters?
Yes.
2508 passes. Laura, thank you. Next on the agenda, and while not properly noticed previously, is executive session, and I believe we've got a motion to recess into executive session this evening. And I believe the council president's going to read that in, and we're going to go for about 15 minutes.
15? Okay. Excellent, thank you. I make a motion to recess into executive session to discuss personnel matters relating to non-elected personnel pursuant to KSA 75-4319B subsection 1, specifically the city administrator's contract, beginning at 7:30 p.m., returning to regular session at 7:45 p.m.
All those, so that's motion Shute.
Second.
Second Melton, that we recess into executive session, returning at 7:45, you said, right? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? We stand in recess. No, go ahead. We got some. Well, no, it's, here we go.
Okay.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to resume regular session.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Shute, second Harrison, that we resume regular session. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstention? We're back in regular session. Last item on the agenda for this evening is council update. We'll start with staff. Does staff have any updates for council? Alan, you're here, might as well ask.
No, nothing new other than currently we have no positions that we're recruiting for, and we're going to be posting due to, from the passage of the career ladder, we're going to be posting the new jobs for people, for just internal people to get promotions.
That's good news.
Very good.
No openings.
Yeah.
No vacancies.
All right. Gonzalo?
Nothing.
Jeff? Larry?
Nothing further.
Ryan?
Yes, Mayor, I have a couple items, if I could.
Please.
The city has received a request for an ADA ramp replacement at the intersection of Main and Elm Street. In our original 2015 CDBG plan, we did include work at this intersection. However, with the substantial amount of concrete removal and replacement needed to meet current ADA standards, the cost for this one intersection would have exceeded the remaining funds in the project budget. As there are currently ramps at this intersection, we did make the decision to complete a number of other ADA upgrades south of Main Street. The Street, Sidewalk, and Stormwater Advisory Committee is currently working to prioritize non-existent sidewalks throughout our community, basically taking a comprehensive overall look at the city. Once this work is complete, staff feels that a possible combined effort with the ADA Advisory Committee to prioritize ADA ramp improvements would be a good next step. Another concern that we've here this time of year with the snow is that sidewalks and ramps become impassable for those wishing to use them. City code does require abutting property owners to clean sidewalks within 48 hours after a storm event ends. The 48 hours is fairly representative of the Kansas City metropolitan area. At this time, we do not have an automatic fine that kicks in for failure to clear. During prolonged cold periods, residents that do depend on sidewalks for access to what the city has to offer can be severely limited. Also wanted to provide you an update on hangar leases. Staff has received, as of this afternoon, 41 signed leases with payment. We did receive a couple more this evening. There are still a few tenants that have not received the new leases, as was mentioned tonight, and that's due to the holidays or errors in the mailing addresses, which we made a few. In addition to the signed leases, we have received approximately 10 checks for January rent with no signed leases. There are also a number of tenants that have stated they will be in later this week due to the lateness of getting the lease. City staff did put a copy of the lease and minimum standards on the websites, and we do have copies at City Hall for anybody needing them. We are also telling tenants that at the last council meeting, council directed staff to work with the Airport Advisory Board over the next 3 months to recommend changes to the standards, and that enforcement of the minimum standards will not occur for a minimum of 90 days until the board and council has had an opportunity to review and update as needed. And one other thing, if you've been near Lincoln Lane and Moonlight, you'll be seeing lots of improvements there. We hope to have that up within the next couple of weeks. So.
Very good. Thanks, Mike. Chief?
I don't have anything. I'll have news on the dogs next meeting.
Okay.
They're down there picking it out now.
Very good. Saw the new vehicles. Look sharp. Good price. Well done. Jeannie, anything? Laura? Ryan?
No.
Cheryl? All right, does council have anything for staff? Rich?
No, sir.
Todd?
2 quick things. The Dropbox, I heard reference to that. Is that in the plans, or is that coming soon?
Yeah, actually, we installed the base out at the airport. We have an old drop box that we're getting re-lettered. But because of the, we wanted to put a little envelope box in there with it, so people could actually, that are stopping at the airport, to be able to tie down overnight, some transient parking, that they could, at this point, more voluntarily, but put a $5 overnight fee in the envelope. And so we're waiting for that box to arrive so we can mount it on the pole and then install it. So it should be, hopefully, very soon.
Okay, and then the other thing, I received an email, I'm sure everyone else did, about the sidewalks and the snow removal. It sounded like he was talking about around City Hall, Mr. Carson.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know, I haven't had a chance to look, are there areas that need to be still addressed?
Yeah, those areas are on, adjacent to private property.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
Brittany Court itself can't get out of there.
Okay.
But the streets in front of City Hall, are fine, or the sidewalks in front of city buildings.
Lee?
Yeah, I was kind of curious about the point that Ray Dorr brought up about minimum standards being not included as part of the lease, and I guess it's basically a question for Ryan. I guess, what's your take on that? I didn't really even consider that before tonight. So, is it really standard to have non-binding components to a lease that we can go in and change at any time, or is that true that we can go and change those minimum standards and create more stringent standards so that folks would have to vacate?
Sure. Yeah, I think we did talk about this at the last meeting on the 23rd a little bit. The reason why they're referenced in there is, if they aren't referenced, I mean, you all still have regulatory authority over what happens out there at the airport. And so when you pass your minimum standards, those have the effect of being regulatory in nature. But if you include it and incorporate it into the underlying lease, then the lessors are now legally obligated to comply with the minimum standards in two ways. First is regulatory, and so, you know, there's enforcement mechanisms in the minimum standards for violations. You could walk through that. The second is contractual. And if a lessor is violating the minimum standards, then not only do you have the regulatory authority, but you would also have the authority to say, hey, your compliance with the minimum standards is required as part of your contractual obligation, and your failure to comply with those constitutes a breach of the lease, and we could, in theory, terminate.
Okay. So, the other point that I'm curious about is the insurance clause itself, and how it got back into the lease after the fact, after the airport board had met and submitted their recommendation, I guess, and then I guess they, you reviewed it, put it back in, put the insurance requirement back in there. What was the thought process there, and what was because I've gotten an email from an individual out at the airport that said the meeting on the 10th of August where the consultant was basically telling us about insurance, or telling the airport board about insurance. His intent at that time, according to this email that I received, was that these requirements would be imposed upon commercial operations and not necessarily individual tenants. So, I guess what's your take on that? And
yeah, I mean, all I can do is comment on kind of my interaction with the lease. The lease document that was forwarded to me had the the insurance obligation in it. There was a proposal to strike, so the underlying language indicated that the insurance would provide protection of not less than $100,000 with respect to any one person, $100,000 with respect to one accident, not less than $200,000 with respect to property damage. The proposed revision that came back from me that had been vetted with the airport board was, and not less than $25,000 with respect to damage to non-owned hangars. It was the non-owned hangar provision that was struck. So, ultimately, I agreed to that. That's the version that came back to me.
Okay.
As a practical matter, I mean, we can talk about the pros and cons of having insurance. Obviously, and to address some of the comments that were made earlier, obviously from the city's perspective, from a risk management perspective, and quite frankly, from the lessor's perspective, both parties are in a better position if there's insurance in place. And the gentleman who stood up and talked about the fact that, if there's a fire and I've got $100,000 or $200,000 and it causes $1.3 million in loss, well, then my insurance isn't going to cover it. Fine, that's right. But if you don't have insurance, then you're on the hook for it. Just because you don't have insurance doesn't mean you don't have liability for it. Insurance just helps cushion the blow to you. And in fact, what would likely happen is that the city's insurer, because the city will still take out insurance on the property, then the loss, the city's insurer, pursuant to every contract of insurance, our insurer has a right of subrogation to go back after the individual who caused the damage and the loss, and they will do that. So if the lessors don't have any insurance whatsoever, then the only pocket that they're gonna, on the subrogation claim that they're gonna have to go after is their own personal pocket, because there's not gonna be any insurance. So from a practical perspective, we can talk about whether it's prudent or whether it makes sense in the context of hangar leases to require insurance, but it's really for everybody's protection.
Okay. Thank you very much. The last thing I had was just a quick comment about what Brian had mentioned earlier. I wanted to just elaborate a little bit on what the Streets and Sidewalks and Stormwater and other things committee has been working on. And
The catch-all.
yeah, We have been working on a very comprehensive method of going through all of the sidewalk gaps. Brian's provided us with very detailed maps of all the sidewalks and where sidewalks are necessary, where the gaps are located. And we've got some criteria that we're working through to figure out just a very detailed analysis of each one of the gaps and where we need work. And the committee's invested quite a bit of time in this already. They're going to continue investing time in it to go through the entire list of all the different areas. I just want to make sure that folks are aware that that's what's going on right now and how we're going to arrive at a score. We're going to have a scoring system for each of these areas so that they'll be prioritized, because there's only so much time, there's only so much money, and we got to do something in some logical order that makes sense and not just based on who's squeaking the loudest. So
Right.
That's all I have.
Okay. Christina?
On the sidewalk, stuff, do we know I'm talking about snow removal, sorry. We're confident that the city responsibilities are being taken care of in 48 hours?
The majority of them are. If you go by the downtown storage tanks, that wasn't shoveled. So, I mean, the vast majority of ours are, but when I looked at that today, that one had not been included.
Jeff, you look like you're leaning in there, pal.
Well, I was just going to say, from the areas the Parks and Recreation Department is responsible for, I can't say for certain it was within 48 hours. With this recent storm we had, although there wasn't a lot of accumulation, with how we had to attack it, we had to hit priority 1 areas several times before we could even move on to our priority 2 areas. So sometimes it's rather difficult to get it all taken care of within the 48 hours. But we certainly split our shift and work on it as best we can.
And then as far as the ADA, are we convinced, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, but are we convinced that we're familiar and have researched any other opportunities for grants and so forth, specific in the area of ADA?
David?
Please.
We just got our new grants writer on board, and one of the things that we are looking at with the grants writer and talking with the council president as liaison to that committee is that we're going to be convening with him, the grants writer, and looking at what opportunities we might have for ADA. So, no, we have not totally vetted that because we just got the grants coordinator, but we are on top of that.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, no.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, hold on.
Please.
I'm going through my notes. I had something else. Go ahead, Steve, if I think of something.
No, that's fine. I'm going to go back to the situation with the lease language for insurance just for a second, Ryan. This will be the last thing you probably hear from me on this, but I think that there was a concern about the commercial operation versus the private tenant. I know that when I'm running a commercial, if I have to lease, for example, an event center here in town, I have to post an event liability insurance policy in order to be able to, as a condition of signing that agreement. I think that's what the consultant might have been referring to initially, was if you've got a jump operation, a guy decides to fall out of a plane and doesn't pack his chute right and ends up going into a field, and that the relatives of that family are going to be suing somebody. They always do, and I understand that. And they go after, the city because the city has got the deepest pockets, okay? The liability policy on that is, the jump operation have that liability policy in order to be able to prevent that from cascading down or, try to be the first point of relief. And so, I understand liability in that sense. I don't understand necessarily compelling insurance. I understand it's good to have. But we're compelling insurance by private tenants out at the airport right now for their personal aircraft, whether it's experimental, under construction, et cetera, as a condition of being able to sign a lease agreement. And I don't know if that's necessarily, I mean, I understand we want them to do the right thing and have insurance, but it almost seems like we're trying to protect that tenant from themselves more than the city. And because the city's going to, you know, our insurance, I understand the NPR insurance is going to rebuild those hangars. We're going to be, you know, made whole by our insurance. They'll subrogate the person who started the fire, okay? And it's up to them to manage the repercussions of that at that point. So, I mean, am I correct in that? Is that a good interpretation?
Yeah, I haven't been at any, or I haven't been asked to attend any of the airport board meetings, so I can't really speak to what the intent was. All I can tell you is what was drafted. And the way it's drafted, it's not restricted to just commercial operations, is the way I read it.
Yeah, I mean, I would, common sense to me would tell me that, you know, yes, we'd like to have an insurance policy, but it's not our job to protect them from themselves.
Well,
Well,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I understand. But I mean, from a commercial perspective, they better have insurance because we want to be able to protect the city from liability. In the case of a third-party operation, whether it's a full-time trainer or something like that, and, you know, they're doing a flight school out there, and, you know, guy decides to give him control of the seat, and the guy ends up putting it into the ground, and then there's all sorts of liability, wrongful death, et cetera, that happens. We don't want that tort to come back to the city.
Right, it's just, but they're just talking about a matter of degree, really. I mean, commercial operations, sure, there's more risk.
Absolutely.
But on this side over here, I mean, you know, we're talking about airplanes here. And just as you would with motor vehicles, the state of Kansas dictates that everybody has a motor, that you have to have insurance. And the reason is because you're protecting not only the operator of the motor vehicle, you're protecting any damage that operator would occasion, in this case, on public property. All I'm saying, we can walk away from it. That's fine. I mean, I can take direction, but it does afford the city protection, and you know, it may not make sense in this context, like I said, and if it's the will of the governing body that we walk away from it, we can do that.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah,
real quick?
Absolutely.
Now, the insurance that we're going to have at the airport, I don't know that it's going to be NPR. Is it going to be NPR, Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay. Can we get an opinion from them about whether or not we are minimizing risk to the city by asking the tenants at the airport to maintain this insurance?
Okay.
And not just a sentence. I mean, let's get a little brief opinion.
Detailed analysis.
I think that would be a really good idea. And really, what it comes down to for me is the state does require private motor vehicle operators to have insurance. Absolutely understand that. The state does not require aircraft operators to have insurance on their liability, you know, for their aircraft.
But you know, it's not in commercial leases, things like that. It's not uncommon to require the occupant or the lessor lessee to have insurance. It's just, it's a matter of shifting risk. The city's in a better position if they have it. If you don't want to have it, we don't have to have it. But we are in a better position if they have the insurance. And they're in a better position. Because if they experience a loss, which causes damage to city property, they're not going to be paying for it out of their own pocket. Their insurance will be.
I think that the big thing, when you minimize risk, everybody wins, even if in the short term it's a little bit more cost. Shannon Templeton's done a great job as our risk manager. I think we're having, you know, have had a banner year since she came on board, and we've employed things and new policies and procedures that we didn't have before. But yeah, if we're looking out for the citizens of Gardner, then we should be making sure that we're minimizing the risk to the city.
Certainly.
That's posed by the residents, I mean, the denizens of, the Gardner Airport.
I'll be honest, based on the example that was presented to us tonight about all the hangars going up in flames, I'd be probably getting more than $200,000 insurance if it was me, because, I'd like to enjoy the plane after it gets rebuilt or whatever, so.
Sure.
Okay, I've got two other items, thank you. I just, I know we're beating that horse pretty hard. The land, the Stark land, behind Austin's, we had discussed, that tax delinquency for a long time. Multiple mills impact on our bottom line as a city because those individuals decide not to, pay.
Serious housekeeping.
Yes, that's a lot of housekeeping. And I just wanted to get some sort of an update on that. Have we heard anything back from the county? Are we still stuck in neutral, going backwards? What's the deal?
Well, you're not backwards. When I talked to them last, it was probably just as we were finishing the budget.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to their legal counsel, Mary Buell. She's, what is she? She's somebody in the legal department.
Yep.
Somebody higher up, and they were getting ready to, she said they have a 90 to 120-day process where they have to make sure that they notify everybody that could be involved as a creditor or debtor, and then they start the final foreclosure proceedings. And she had said that the city administrator would receive a letter. To my knowledge, the city administrators received no letter yet in 2015, but it was, apparently it's right on the trigger that county has yet to pull that trigger.
Okay, I want this, personally, I want this resolved this year, and if that means that we have to take matters into our own hands, then I'd even be willing to look at that potential approach. Because it is costing the taxpayers of the city significant amounts of money to try to settle that debt, and we cannot afford to have it on our books, especially with some of the stuff going on. And maybe I'm just the only person at this dais that thinks that way, but
No.
it's gone too long.
I'm not at the dais, but I whine and moan considerably, and I'll just keep adding that my council's not pleased, and see where we go from there, and then we'll work with
She's
mine.
planted these seeds that you're watering.
Oh,
right
no,
now.
no.
So,
I don't know what you're
and honestly, that's,
Put some fertilizer on it.
what I would like, is
Too much fertilizer.
Cheryl, can we maybe talk to county staff about getting some time with Commissioner Topliker and maybe
Yes.
Eilert as well?
That's probably the next
So that
step.
we can, you and I can go visit.
Sure.
Oh.
There's shipping containers on that property too, isn't there?
Yes, there are.
Yeah.
There are legally.
Are legally placed there. so-
They've been there for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's a
Codes violation.
a codes violation. You might wanna, you know where we're talking about? Okay.
All right.
Steve, you've got one more?
Yeah, one last one. The famous truck routes discussion that we, were discussing several weeks ago. And regarding not just our existing truck routes, but 191st Street, and what the future of that roadway is going to be. I wanted to get some sort of an update on that and to see, where we need to go from here in terms of a possible work session to get that done. I think we had discussed it, and it kind of got put on the shelf. I wanted to see if we get it off the shelf and start working on that.
Can we get it off the shelf? Brian?
Yes.
Larry? Cheryl?
Yes,
I know, you guys,
absolutely.
this is nothing, you guys, believe me, I don't want to deal with it either, but we've got to deal with it.
Yep.
I did have one more,
Oh.
thing after all.
All right.
Fireworks. We're coming up on fireworks, so
We have it.
we need to do something with that, because I'm ready to light off some fireworks legally.
Okay. All right,
I think that's it, that's all I got.
okay.
I thought I might ask it real quick. Oh, sorry.
Uh-oh.
On back to the airport, Brian, and I'm assuming this is you or Cheryl, we've talked, over the past couple of months, we've talked about a lot of things since all of this has come to light, and we've been working through a lot of stuff, primarily focusing on the leases. Can we get, within the next couple of meetings, kind of a prioritized list of things that are gonna be worked through and could potentially change both this year and then going forward. And some examples, as I was going back through notes, there's multiple hangars, people that have multiple hangars, out there, and my understanding is they don't have their own unique airplane in each of those hangars. The wait list has never really been made public. How can we get that so that people can actually see the wait list and understand where everybody is? So if we could just get kind of a housekeeping list of, hey, here's all the things that we've talked about that we need to address, and understand kind of what the actions are gonna be to address those, that would be great.
I know.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yes.
Forward to Laura's
And then just kind of, the Economic Development, Committee is gonna meet Wednesday. It'll be our first meeting,
awesome.
so, 6 o'clock here in Gardner Chambers.
Excellent.
Stole my thunder,
Oh.
because that's all that I really had. I'm glad to see everybody made it back, safely and soundly. We're going to have a great 2016. We're gonna kick it off with a little addition this week with the Economic Development Committee. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend this one, but we will make them so that we can all attend in the future.
One last
thing.
I just want, well, and this is really for you, I'd really appreciate it if you would read off, the names of the folks that we appointed this evening.
Oh, sure. No, we'll
Thank them publicly.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Well, this evening, we appointed Amy Williamson to serve on the Citizens Police Advisory Committee with a term expiring in 2017. For the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, Molly Keene and Rex Cummings have both been appointed to serve through December 2018. John Bolyard and Lauren Knopfsinger through December 2017, and Steve Hale and Jim Dean through December 2016. Also appointed to the ADA Advisory Committee, Jim Germer and Julie Aldridge, with terms expiring in December 2018, Kim Vickers and Anouk Hermerick, with December 2017 expirations, and Bart Mallory and Wes Rand with December 2016.
Thank you.
And,
Congratulations to all those.
yes, absolutely. You know, that's, starting off in 2016, we've got 25 more citizen volunteers that'll be participating in helping, and yes, keeping the city staff hopping. So, unless anybody else has something in addition, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Shute. Second, Melton, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, any abstentions? We are adjourned. It was crushing Baylor by this point last.